everyone, 𝙏𝙚𝙤𝙤𝙤 from Think Global Logistics. Today we are going to touch on a subject which rarely gets talked about. It's often very well known within the industry, that is logistics, freight forwarding, all that sort of fun stuff within our industry. But from a customer perspective, this information is seldom being shared with the customers and the wider community that our industry services. And this topic is what happens to the company you are currently using for importing or exporting or any type of logistics. It gets acquired by another company, or acquires another company, or merges with another entity that becomes a different type of entity. So today we're going to dive a little deeper into this and how it will definitely affect you depending on who you are. Firstly, companies acquiring companies is very much a reality in any economies. We shouldn't see that as an anomaly, but something as a natural progression to how business grow and evolve. However, there are often some practical lessons we have to understand so that we can be prepared if we are being a customer of one of these companies that goes through this change. Let's just call it that mildly. The obvious thing is, firstly, you need to understand the company that provides you that service. Are they the buyer or the buyee? Usually the company buying the other company has obviously greater say and control on how the new entity evolves and becomes. Very rarely that the company being bought becomes the headmaster of the new entity, right? So it has happened to me on one of the companies I worked with, where the company we purchased became the leaders of the new entity. That was an entertaining experience. Let's just put it mildly again. So say the company you're working with, they have just bought another company. What you can expect in the immediate aftermath of all of that is you're going to get a lot of mixed messaging. And that's purely because when you've got two entities coming together, the amount of chaos that exists, no amount of software or good people within this organization can avoid. It's just what happens when we clash two entities together. However, they're trying to give you the spin about how the two companies' ethos and the direction and the strategies are identical and that's why they come together. It's rarely the case, guys. It's always because it made commercial sense. Even though the spin master will have you believe, oh, Mr. Customer, it's for your benefit. No, it's for the shareholders' benefit or the owner's benefit. Make sure you lock that reality in. So once that happens, all this chaos comes, with people coming together. You got the buyer and the people being bought and so forth. Naturally, when you cram two groups of people together, there's going to be politics. There's going to be a lot of, demotivation. Let's even call it that, because it doesn't matter which side of the fence you sit on. You're just not quite sure whether you're still going to have your job once you come together, because no acquisition or merging happens without somebody losing their job. That again is a reality of commerce. That's just what happens. But it's not nice when you're the customer on the receiving end of this, because one day your logistics is going smoothly and the next, because of this thing happened outside your control, all of a sudden the person you were contacting or communicating with is no longer there, or all of a sudden you detect a certain level of morale drop, or their communication is not like how it used to be. All of this can and will happen to you, right? One of the classic examples currently right now, we have 𝙔𝙤𝙤𝙤𝙤 who's being put on market for a very long time and nobody wants to buy it, right? Now there's a couple of contenders in terms of now it's getting a bit hot again with people wanting to buy. One of the most likely candidates will be 𝙔𝙪𝑠𝑘, which is already a juggernaut of a company in our industry by being one of the largest shipping lines, who have in their past have bought other freight forwarders, global freight forwarders, the most prominent one being 𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙬, which they spun into 𝙔𝙪𝑠𝑘 Logistics. So now they're thinking about buying 𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙬. Again, that means pulling these two companies and cramming them. On the surface, you might think, oh, great. Okay, well, the company I'm using just become bigger and bigger. They must be very powerful. They've got a lot of money. I feel very secure. That's probably one of the biggest myths in our industry, and in fact, in any industry. When a company gets bigger, It's not because they're doing it for their customers' interest. Again, I have to remind you, it is always for the shareholders' interest. They want to generate higher margins, higher revenue, more power as quickly as possible. And usually, sometimes that also means a certain level of their customers will be culled. Why? Because they simply don't want them anymore. They're too small. The larger a company becomes, they want to go for the enterprise size clients because those are the only ones is going to scratch their black hole of expenses. When you got two groups of people, doesn't matter which side of the fence you're on, colliding together. They know what's coming, but nobody can know for certain. Morale always drops. Service level will always drop. Those are realities. I've been on the receiving end or on both sides of this many times over in my career. I know what it is to be on either side. And I've seen firsthand how internally in these organizations behave. And believe me, it's not a pretty picture. And the first ones that suffers are the customers of both entities. When a company gets bigger on that scale, for example, DB Schenker, Maersk, they don't want 80% of the business on their books. You know, the SMEs and so forth, they're going to charge you an arm and leg, and then, you know, you're using it because of their name, and they know it. And frankly, if they don't make good money from you, it's not worth their time servicing your needs. When they have the likes of the multinationals that can give them multiple touch points, multiple stream revenues, import, export, air freight, sea freight, warehousing in multiple continents. Why would they focus on you who is only trading in one country? It doesn't scratch their itch. And this is why often we hear from a lot of our customers who came from those environments, they say, you know what, we work with DHL, Schenker, or you name the top 10, whoever they are. They said, you know what, they're great because we can see their trucks on the streets and so forth and all that. That's all the niceties. But then they say, well, when you dig a little bit deeper, they say, yeah, but when we have certain special needs or requests, we find it very difficult to communicate with them because we find them very inflexible. We find them that they're actually not listening to us, even though they're saying yes on the phone or email or in person. And the reality is you are just a number to the salesperson, not even the branch management, just a number to the salesperson so that salesperson can make commission off you and meet their budgets. I was one of them. If you're a large customer, if you're large enough where you have met the branch manager, where you met the country manager, and maybe you have met the regional director, well, then you're someone serious, important to them. So when things come together and bigger, it's your opportunity to negotiate. If they're still coming to you actively engaging you, in the very multiple touch points with different layers of management, saying, hey, this has happened, you're important to us, we're continuing, and you haven't seen any service deviations, in fact, only improve, it means that's a great sign. You're important to them. And when you're important to them, this is your time to negotiate. Say, hey, you just merged, going through some chaotic moments. In fact, you don't want to have any leaks, especially the likes of me, because you're obviously coming to me so aggressively wanting to keep my business. Well, I'm happy to stay with you as long as you continue the service level, improve here, here, and here. And, oh, by the way, I expect sharper rates on these areas. Almost 90% of our businesses in Australia are considered small business in the global markets. Look yourself in the mirror and say, am I big enough for me to use this large entity? And if it's yes, okay, well, they're just being bought or we're buying someone else and they become bigger now. Will I maintain my status? Because with two companies coming together, they're going to be pulling the two businesses together. Whereas before you could be in top 10, but the other company comes in, you could be not even in the top 50. How do you know you're using the right freight forwarder? Well, two cardinal rules. Make sure you know where you sit in the client portfolio. The larger you are, making sure the higher on the list you are. Top 5, top 10. Smaller you are, be real with yourself. Am I in the top 20? Well, ideally you want to use a freight forwarder who has more than 20 customers. Anything less than that, I'm not rubbishing my smaller competitors. Good on them, we're all doing a good fight. Power to them. They have a lot of value. We started off as that. TGL wouldn't be where it is today if we didn't have those customers that believed in our dream when we were only a two-man show when we first started. But one thing is for certain, know where you sit in the hierarchy of that company. because the lower you are, doesn't matter what volume you're moving, it means nothing. Another thing, what I have learned in my time during these tumultuous times of companies acquiring companies and being bought and so forth, is that think about your own friendship circles. When you get two groups that may be a little bit detached and you bring them together for the first time, there's always a level of showmanship and competitiveness. A freight forwarder is only good as the person contacting you doing the work for you. If there's any uncertainty or stress within that environment of that individual, it's going to directly impact you. Two groups of people coming together is going to have a lot of politics. I've worked with one particular freight forwarder, very well known, in fact, Australia's largest. But the international division was this mishmash of smaller companies that this company has bought to create the international division. And when I jumped in, that international portion of the business was made up already 5, 6 smaller companies clashed together. And boy, was it my most depressing years. And it was demoralizing. And you can see while the management were playing all these games, all of the operators and the salespeople under them were sort of going, well, this is directionless, purposeless, what's the point? My manager's not even doing the work and nobody cares. Why should we care? So be mindful, when two companies come together, however they come together, there's going to be politics internally. And that doesn't translate well when two groups of people are in conflict. Another important point we've got to be mindful of is time. How long, when these two companies together, will they take time for them to gel together? So which means is that, okay, two consistent companies making their revenue, all of a sudden they come together, you're going to have this chaos. Eventually they're going to come along into the same wavelength and then reverberate in sync, right? Some would say it will take minimum 2 years. That was the sort of the yardstick that we used to use when I was coming through the ranks. But I can tell you that in modern day today, you'd be lucky to do it in 5. In fact, some companies that I know of today, after maybe even 10 years, they never truly actually came together and gelled properly. Now, when the two companies come together, there will be a fair amount of leakage in terms of business. They will, because customers will just go, no, this is too messy, too complex. My service that I was expecting has completely disappeared. I'm going somewhere else. And this is where independents like us, we rejoice when large multinationals gets bought out or being merged or so forth, because we know there will be a good portion of customers that these companies don't care about, that they're just happy to lose. Sometimes they will lose it, they don't even know they've lost it. That's how insignificant some of these businesses are. What's insignificant for them is very important to us, because this is where we cut our mustard, right? We revel at the idea of servicing customers that's fit for our purpose, that the big multinationals don't want. We revel in helping our customers seeing a better way of doing things, where the multinationals have just given them one way or the highway. Time after time, we come across businesses who use multinationals, and they've always used them, and they've just accepted the way how things are done, until we sort of show them and demonstrate, hey, no, we can do it this way. We can be more nimble here, flexible there. And all of a sudden they go, wow, is that possible? We say, yes. And on that note, thank you for listening. And I hope I brought some insight and, the inner workings of this subject.